So today we're making stock for cooking, and it happens to be duck stock because I had some duck bones from a duck that I butchered the other day. This is the carcass of the duck. I also had some bones left over that I had frozen that I had used for some other purpose. So put them in a stock pot. Stock pot should be taller than it is wide, and the idea is that as the liquid starts to get warm, the steam rises and some of it will condense and fall back into the pot, so you lose less liquid as you're cooking. You also want to add onions, and they don't have to be cut up very much. You want to have 3 parts onions to 2 parts carrots to 1 part of celery. Now, I've prepared everything else in advance, but I wanted to do this one onion because it'll show you an easy way to get the skin off. Press down hard on it as you're rolling it, and then cut off the root end. I'm sorry, not the root end. This is the root end here with the little strings coming out of it. Cut off the other end, and then that makes it much easier to peel. So we're adding the second onion. Again, only needs to be very coarsely chopped. If you have a little bit of the skin in there, it's not really a big deal. Then we'll add the carrots. Now I've pre-peeled the carrots and cut them up. This 3 parts onion to 2 parts carrots to 1 part celery is not an exact science. You only need to be close with that. And regarding the celery, this is a great thing to do with celery tops, which you don't normally use very much. Just cut off the top of the celery bunch, throw it in there. That's about 1 part that we need. You can also add trimmings, and these trimmings could be from various vegetables. I had some carrot greens, so we'll throw those in there. Also want to throw in either a head of garlic where you've chopped the top of the head off, just throw it in whole, or you can throw in some garlic that's already been peeled, roughly about a head's worth of garlic. Throw in some parsley. Whenever anybody uses parsley, you're always left with the stems. Just cut them off, freeze them, use them when you need them for stock, throw those in. Need some thyme. A lot of people will tie this into a bundle. You don't really need to because the whole thing's going to be strained at the end. And some bay leaves. Crush those up, 2 or 3 bay leaves. And then you want about a tablespoon of black peppercorns. You never use salt in stock because as the stock cooks, the salt can concentrate. And later, if you use the stock and you reduce it down to a smaller volume, the salt will concentrate and become way too salty. Next, you want to fill the stock pot with water. Now, some people just fill up to cover all of the bones and vegetables. I will fill up usually to where you see the rivets on this pot. Now, next you will want to turn on the heat, and you'll want to start with a relatively high heat, say medium-high, and you'll want to bring it to a boil. Now, it's a good idea to know how long it might take for water, this much water in your own pot, to come to a boil, because you don't want to get it into a hard rolling boil. You want to just bring it to a boil and then reduce it to a low simmer. If you let it boil, full boil, the fat that is on the bones, this happens to be duck. Duck has a lot of fat on the bones. I tried to trim off of it as much as I could. Chicken, you'll probably be making chicken stock more often. Chicken has a lot of fat on the bones as well. And if you bring the stock to a boil and let it go into a rolling boil, the fat will come off of the bones and go into the stock in an emulsion. And it will be very difficult to strain it out later on. You'll wind up with very fatty stock. At the end here, after the stock has been chilled, all or most of the fat should rise to the top, and you should be able to skim it off easily, so you're left with very clear stock. So we're just going to let this come to a boil and check it then. Okay, so we can see that the stock is just now starting to come to a boil. So we're going to reduce, let's turn off this fan for better sound, and we're going to reduce the heat so that we have just a gentle simmer. If the vegetables are covering all of the top of the liquid, then you want to pull some aside so that you can have a place for the bubbles from the simmering to come through. And we're going to let this simmer now for 2 or 3 hours. That'll give it plenty of time for all of the flavor from the bones to infuse into the stock water, and also for any meat to be rendered from the bones. Now, of course, we're going to be straining this and getting rid of everything except the stock itself, but we want to make sure that all of the flavor from the meat and the bones gets into the stock. Now, as this simmers, you might want to check it every now and then, and if any scum starts to form on the top, take a skimmer like this and skim it off and just toss it. But again, that may or may not happen, and it's not really crucial because you'll be straining this at the end. So now we're just going to let this simmer for a couple of hours. So here it is 3 hours later, about 3 hours later, and I've skimmed off a little bit of the scum every now and then. Over this 3 hours, you can see that the certain amount of the stock is evaporated, about an inch or so below the rivets. We started out at the rivets earlier. Strain the stock. We want to strain out all the vegetables and the bones into another pot. Now I just discard all of the vegetables and bones. So here's our strained stock. We're going to put this into the fridge with a lid slightly askew so that some of the heat can continue to escape as it's cooling in the fridge. And we're going to cool it overnight so that the fat can congeal on the top. So here we are back with the duck stock. I thought it was finished, but after I took a closer look at it, I see that there's a bit more fat suspended in the stock than I would like. It's probably the result of either there being a whole lot of fat on the duck, or the stock boiled a little bit too much and left some fat globules suspended in the stock. You can kind of see it here. Let's move this for a second. Maybe see there's some fat globules that are floating in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to strain it. I'm going to use a device called a Chinese cap, or chinois. It's probably not politically correct now, but that's what it's called. And we're just going to pour this through the chinois. And this is a very fine mesh chinois, so it should take out most of that stock. In fact, most of that fat. In fact, if you look in there, you can see little fat globules that have clung to the side of the mesh of the chinois. And in fact, it's built up enough fat down in the bottom there that the stock is no longer going through. The fat has kind of blocked the holes. But now we have a very clean stock. I may actually also strain it one more time through cheesecloth, but I think this is probably good. So now I'm going to divide this up into plastic containers and freeze it for later use.